Lifeguard teaches scared adult to swim after hours, unaware she was a famous producer's mother. The thought lingered in Mike Sullivan's mind like an unfinished prayer as he watched the elderly woman sitting alone on the far bench, her eyes fixed on the rippling water, fingers clutching her canvas bag with white-knuckled determination. For 3 Tuesdays now, she had appeared at exactly 6:15 p.m., watching the children's swimming classes from a distance, never approaching the water herself. Mike wiped down the lifeguard chair, pretending not to notice her. But something in her posture, rigid yet somehow fragile, spoke of a battle being waged within. As the last giggling child departed with squeaking flip-flops across the tiled floor, the woman remained, a solitary figure against the backdrop of chlorine-scented air and afternoon light streaming through high windows. "We're closing in 15 minutes, ma'am," Mike called gently, his voice echoing across the now empty natatorium. She startled, clutching her bag tighter. "Of course, I'm sorry. I was just..." Her voice trailed off, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. She stood abruptly, smoothing wrinkles from her linen pants with trembling hands. "Are you interested in swimming lessons?" Mike asked, walking toward her. At 32, he'd been the head lifeguard at Oak Ridge Community Center for nearly a decade, teaching everyone from toddlers to seniors. "Oh, no." She shook her head too quickly. "No, I was just..." She gestured vaguely with one hand, while the other maintained its death grip on the bag. "Just watching. My daughter used to love swimming as a child." Mike nodded, noticing the faint accent in her voice. Something European, perhaps. She was elegant, probably in her late 60s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that held a depth of something he couldn't quite name. Fear? Longing? "I'm Mike," he said, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. "Eleanor," she replied. "Eleanor Wright." Her hand was cool and light in his, like holding a bird. She withdrew it quickly. "Well, Eleanor, if you ever decide you'd like to learn, we offer adult classes on Thursday evenings." She gave a small, tight smile. "Thank you, but I don't." She swallowed. "Water and I have a complicated relationship." Something in her voice made Mike pause. 20 years of lifeguarding had taught him to recognize the different shades of water fear, from the casual nervousness of beginners to the bone-deep terror of the truly aquaphobic. "I understand," he said, meaning it. "But if you ever change your mind, I also offer private lessons." Eleanor nodded politely, clearly eager to end the conversation. She murmured a goodbye and walked away, her shoulders squared with the precise dignity of someone fighting to maintain composure. Mike watched her go, puzzled by the tug of connection he felt. In the empty pool area, the water lapped softly against the tiles, whispering secrets he couldn't quite hear. The following Tuesday, Eleanor was back, perched on the same bench, this time with a paperback book she wasn't reading. Mike gave her a friendly wave, which she returned with a hesitant lift of her hand. After the lessons ended and the pool emptied, he approached her again. "Still just watching?" Eleanor closed her unread book. "It's peaceful here," she said simply. Then, after a beat of silence, "I almost drowned as a child." The words tumbled out as if she hadn't meant to say them. "In the Mediterranean. I was 7. Mike nodded, careful to keep his expression neutral. "That leaves a mark on a person." "Yes." She looked at him with surprise, perhaps at being so easily understood. "A lifetime of avoiding beaches, pools." She gestured at the water. "But lately I've been thinking I should try to overcome it." "Why now?" Mike asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Eleanor's gaze drifted toward the water. "My 70th birthday is next month. I've spent over 60 years being afraid. That seems quite enough, don't you think?" Mike smiled. "I think that's brave." "Brave," she repeated, testing the word. "I don't feel brave. I feel ridiculous. A grown woman afraid of water." "Fear isn't ridiculous," Mike said, sitting beside her, leaving ample space between them. "Last year I taught a Vietnam veteran who'd avoided water since his helicopter crashed in a river in 1968. He was 81 when he finally learned to float." Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. "Did he succeed?" "He did. Took time. But by summer's end, he was swimming laps." Mike paused. "I could teach you." After hours when no one's around, the sudden hope that flashed across Eleanor's face was quickly replaced by hesitation. "I couldn't ask you to." "You didn't," I offered. Mike gestured around the empty pool. "I'm here until 9 doing maintenance anyway. 7:30 after everyone's gone. We could start with just sitting at the edge, feet in the water. Nothing more." Eleanor looked at the pool, her chest rising and falling more rapidly. For a moment, Mike thought she would refuse. Then she straightened her spine. "Thursday," she said firmly. "Not today. I need to prepare myself. Mike nodded, understanding the courage it took to set even this tentative date with her deepest fear. Thursday at 7:30. I'll be here. However, Eleanor didn't show on Thursday. Mike tried not to feel disappointed as he checked the chemical levels of the pool, the clock ticking past 8. He understood the paralysis of fear, how it could cement feet to the ground just when you decided to move forward. He was skimming leaves from the surface when the heavy door creaked open at 8:17 p.m. Eleanor stood in the entrance, clutching not her usual canvas bag, but a plastic shopping bag that clearly contained a swimsuit and towel. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "I've been sitting in my car for nearly an hour, trying to convince myself to come in." Mike set the skimmer pole against the wall. "But you're here now." "I'm here now," she agreed, her voice slightly steadier. "The changing rooms are through there," he said, pointing. "Take your time." Eleanor disappeared into the women's locker room. Mike used the time to lower the lights slightly, making the space feel smaller, less institutional. He turned on the soft blue underwater lights that gave the pool a gentler appearance. When Eleanor emerged, Mike had to hide his surprise. She wore a modest black one-piece swimsuit under a short terry cloth robe, her hair now in a neat braid. Without her usual slacks and blouse, she looked simultaneously more vulnerable and stronger, like seeing someone's true form beneath a disguise. "The water's warm," Mike said, sitting at the edge of the shallow end with his feet dangling in. 29 degrees Celsius. "I remembered your accent. Thought you might prefer metric." The small smile touched Eleanor's lips. "Austrian originally, though I've been in America since 1975. Vienna? Close. A small village near Salzburg." She approached the edge, standing a careful 3 feet back. The sound of music country, as Americans always say. Mike patted the tile beside him. "Just sitting first. No pressure." Eleanor's breath quickened visibly, but she took a step forward, then another. With deliberate movements, she sat beside him, the robe wrapped tightly around her, feet still safely on dry tile. "When I was 7, she said suddenly, eyes fixed on the water's surface, "my cousin pushed me off a boat. He thought it was funny. I couldn't swim. The water was so clear I could see all the way to the bottom, yet I couldn't reach it or the surface. Just suspended in blue, lungs burning." Mike remained silent, allowing her the space to unfold this memory at her own pace. "A fisherman pulled me out. I don't remember that part. Only the blue and the burning, and the certainty that I was going to die." Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. "Ridiculous to still feel it so vividly after all these years." "Not ridiculous," Mike said quietly. "The body remembers what the mind tries to forget." Eleanor looked at him then, really looked, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "You understand?" It wasn't a question, but Mike nodded anyway. "I do. Now, whenever you're ready, no rush. We can try just putting our feet in the water. Just to feel it. I'll be right here." Eleanor stared at the gently rippling surface. 1 minute passed. 2. Mike didn't rush her, didn't speak. Finally, with movements so deliberate they seemed practiced, she untied her robe, folded it neatly beside her, and slowly, achingly slowly, extended her legs until her toes touched the water. She gasped, a small strangled sound. "You're doing great," Mike said softly. "Just breathe. Feel the warmth. It's just water. Just water," Eleanor repeated, her voice barely audible. Her toes curled reflexively, but she didn't withdraw her feet. "Just water." They sat like that for nearly 20 minutes, Eleanor gradually lowering her feet until the water reached her ankles. When she finally pulled them out, her hands were shaking, but there was a glimmer of something like pride in her eyes. "That's enough for today," she said firmly. "More than enough," Mike agreed. "You were incredible, Eleanor." She looked at him skeptically. "I put my feet in water. Children do that without thinking. You faced something that's terrified you for 60 years. That's not nothing." As Eleanor changed back into her clothes, Mike cleaned up, giving her privacy. When she emerged, she looked composed again. The vulnerable woman in the swimsuit hidden once more beneath tailored pants and a silk blouse. "Same time next week?" Mike asked, careful to keep his tone casual. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded once. "Same time next week." Their lessons continued through autumn, each small victory hard won, sitting on the steps in knee-deep water, splashing water on her face, holding the pool edge while Mike supported her body as it floated. Each session began with terror and ended with a quiet, amazed pride. Mike found himself looking forward to their Thursday evenings, rearranging his schedule to ensure he was always free, declining invitations from friends. It wasn't just Eleanor who was changing. Mike, who had always prided himself on maintaining professional distance with his students, found himself sharing pieces of his own life, his divorce 3 years earlier, his teenage daughter Abby, who lived primarily with her mother in Colorado, the novel he'd been writing in fits and starts for years. Why lifeguarding? Eleanor asked one evening in late October as they sat on the pool steps, the water lapping at her waist now, her hands still firmly gripping the metal railings. You're clearly intelligent, well-read. Mike smiled. I was a competitive swimmer in college, English major with no clear plan afterward. The lifeguarding was supposed to be temporary while I figured things out. And then life happened. Marriage, a mortgage, a baby. The community center offered health insurance, steady hours. I started teaching lessons and discovered I loved it. He shrugged. 15 years later, here I am. Do you regret it? Not pursuing writing more seriously? Mike considered this, watching the play of underwater lights across the surface. Sometimes, but there's something profound about teaching people to swim. It's not just a skill, it's helping someone overcome fear, discover joy, find safety in an element that once seemed hostile. He glanced at her. Like what we're doing. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. My daughter says we should always do what feeds our soul, regardless of prestige or money. A small smile played at her lips. Easy for her to say, of course. She's done very well for herself. What does she do? Mike asked, realizing he knew almost nothing about Eleanor's family, despite the growing ease between them. She makes films, or rather, she helps others make them. A note of unmistakable pride entered Eleanor's voice. Catherine, Katie, she's a producer. Movies? Would I have seen any of them? Eleanor's smile widened. Perhaps. Her latest won several awards this year. Before Mike could ask which film, Eleanor pushed herself up straighter, her expression becoming determined. I want to try putting my face in the water today. Mike recognized the deliberate change of subject, but didn't press. Are you sure? That's a big step. I'm sure, she said firmly. I've been practicing in the sink at home. Ridiculous, I know. Not ridiculous. Smart. Eleanor took several deep breaths. Then, with Mike's hands supportively on her back, she bent forward. She managed to submerge her face for barely a second before jerking back up, eyes wide, water streaming down her face. I did it, she gasped, looking as shocked as if she'd swum the English Channel. Mike beamed at her. You absolutely did. When Eleanor left that evening, there was a new lightness in her step. For the first time, she didn't look back anxiously at the pool before pushing through the exit door. Or in early December, nearly 3 months into their lessons, Eleanor floated unassisted for the first time. Her body trembled with tension, but she remained on the surface, arms outstretched, eyes tightly closed, face tilted toward the ceiling. I'm floating, she whispered, afraid that even speaking might break the spell. You're floating, Mike confirmed, his hands hovering just inches below her back, ready to support her if panic struck. How does it feel? A tear slipped from the corner of her closed eye, merging with the pool water. Like flying, she whispered, like letting go. That evening, she invited Mike for coffee after their lesson, the first time their interaction had extended beyond the pool. They sat in a quiet corner of a nearby cafe, Eleanor wrapped in an elegant wool coat, her wet hair hidden beneath a scarf. I have something for you, she said, reaching into her purse. She withdrew an envelope and slid it across the table. For your patience these past months. Mike left the envelope untouched. Eleanor, you've been paying for the lessons. This isn't necessary. It's not money, she said softly. Please open it. Inside were 2 tickets to a film premiere in Los Angeles, scheduled for the following month. Mike looked up, confused. My daughter's new film, Eleanor explained. I thought perhaps you and Abby might enjoy it. Katie always arranges for me to have tickets, though I rarely use them. All those people, the cameras, she waved a dismissive hand. But you mentioned Abby loves films, and she'll be with you for the holidays. Mike stared at the tickets, recognizing the film title as one of the most anticipated releases of the year. Eleanor, these must be impossible to get. I can't accept. Please, she interrupted. It would mean a great deal to me. You've given me something priceless these past months. Let me give you this small thing in return. The genuine earnestness in her expression made refusal impossible. Thank you, he said finally. Abby will be thrilled. Eleanor smiled, satisfied. Good. Now tell me more about your novel. Last time you mentioned your protagonist was at a crossroads. The premiere was a dazzling affair, more glamorous than anything Mike had ever experienced. He felt distinctly out of place in his one good suit, but 16-year-old Abby was in heaven, wide-eyed at each celebrity sighting, clutching his arm when the stars of the film walked the red carpet. Their seats were surprisingly good. Not front row, but close enough to see the stage clearly when the director and producers would introduce the film. Mike checked the program, scanning for Eleanor's daughter's name among the producers. He found it immediately: Catherine Wright, executive producer. The theater lights dimmed, and the director walked on stage to thunderous applause, followed by several producers. Mike's attention was drawn to a confident woman with dark hair streaked with elegant gray, wearing a simple but obviously expensive black dress. Despite some differences, the resemblance to Eleanor was unmistakable around the eyes and in certain expressions. "That's Catherine Wright," Abby whispered, clearly impressed. "She's like legendary. How did you get these tickets again?" "A friend," Mike murmured, pieces clicking into place. Eleanor hadn't just understated her daughter's success. She'd mentioned it with the same casual tone someone might use to describe a child working at a local business. This wasn't just any producer. Catherine Wright was one of the most powerful women in Hollywood. The film was excellent, thought-provoking, and beautifully shot. As the credits rolled and the lights came up, Abby turned to him with shining eyes. "That was amazing. Can we go to the after-party?" Mike shook his head ruefully. "Our tickets don't include that, honey." As they filed out with the crowd, a young woman with a headset approached them. "Mr. Sullivan." "Mike Sullivan?" Mike nodded, surprised. "Miss Wright would like to meet you, if you have a moment." Before Mike could process this, they were being led through a side door and down a corridor to a small reception area where Catherine Wright was speaking with the director. She excused herself when she saw them approach. "Mike Sullivan," she said, extending her hand. Her voice held the same faint Austrian accent as her mother's. "I'm Catherine Wright. My mother has told me a great deal about you." Mike shook her hand, acutely aware of Abby gaping beside him. "It's a pleasure to meet you. The film was extraordinary." Catherine smiled, Eleanor's smile. "Thank you. And you must be Abby," she said, turning to include the teenager. "Your father tells my mother you're interested in filmmaking?" Abby nodded vigorously, finding her voice. "Yes, ma'am. I'm in my school's film club. Your work is incredible. Well, we're having a small gathering at the hotel restaurant, much quieter than the main after-party. Would you both join us? I'd love to hear how my mother's swimming lessons are progressing." Tuanin. The small gathering included the film's director, lead actors, and key production staff. Abby was in a state of barely contained ecstasy, especially when Catherine introduced her to the film's young star and cinematographer, both of whom took genuine interest in her questions. Mike found himself in conversation with Catherine over drinks in a quiet corner. "I want to thank you," she said seriously. "But what you've done for my mother. I've been trying to get her to address her fear of water for decades." "She's done all the hard work," Mike replied honestly. "She's remarkably brave." Catherine nodded, studying her drink. "She is, though she'd never admit it. Bravery in small private battles isn't something our family has always recognized." She glanced up at him. "She told me you're a writer as well as a lifeguard." "Aspiring writer," Mike corrected. "I haven't actually finished anything." Catherine smiled. "Mother says your storytelling is excellent." She mentioned a novel about a man who discovers his life's purpose through an unexpected detour. Mike felt heat rise to his face. "It's still very rough. Just something I work on between lessons and shifts. Some of the best stories come from people with divided lives," Catherine said thoughtfully. "When you finish it, I hope you'll let me read it. I'm always looking for new voices, new perspectives." "I thank you. That's very kind." Catherine waved this away. "Not kind. Self-interested. Good stories are my business." She hesitated, then added more softly. "Mother also mentioned you're divorced. I hope you don't mind her sharing that." "Not at all," Mike said, though he was surprised Eleanor had discussed his personal life. "I only mention it because she seems lighter since meeting you. She's had a solitary life since my father died 15 years ago. Few close friends, fewer confidants." Catherine looked at him directly. "Whatever your relationship is, teacher, friend, something else, it seems to be good for her." Before Mike could respond to this cryptic statement, Abby rushed over, excitement radiating from her. "Dad, Rachel James just invited me to visit the set of her new film if we're ever in Vancouver. Can you believe it?" The moment for further conversation with Catherine passed. As the evening wound down, she handed Mike her card. "Please stay in touch. About my mother's progress, your novel. Whatever you wish." On the drive back to their hotel, Abby couldn't stop talking about the evening. "How do you even know Catherine Wright?" "That was literally the coolest thing that's ever happened to me." Mike hesitated, unsure how to explain. "I've been teaching her mother to swim." Abby stared at him. "Catherine Wright's mother?" The Catherine Wright? Yes. And you never mentioned this because... Mike shrugged. I didn't know. Eleanor, Mrs. Wright, just said her daughter was a producer. She never mentioned names or how successful she was. Abby shook her head in disbelief. That's so weird. If my mom was Catherine Wright, I'd tell everyone. I think that's exactly why she doesn't, Mike said thoughtfully. Eleanor wants to be known for herself, not her daughter's success. When Mike returned to Connecticut, he texted Eleanor to thank her for the tickets. She responded with an invitation to coffee. The cafe was busy with holiday shoppers, but they found a table in the back corner. Eleanor looked different somehow. Still elegant, but more relaxed. Her hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual tight bun. Did you enjoy the premiere? She asked after they'd ordered. It was incredible. Abby hasn't stopped talking about it. Mike hesitated. I met your daughter. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. Did you? Catherine didn't mention that when we spoke. She sought us out, actually. She wanted to thank me for the swimming lessons. Mike studied Eleanor's face. You never mentioned she was Catherine Wright. Eleanor sipped her coffee. Would it have made a difference? No, but then it wasn't relevant, she said simply. Too often, once people know who Katie is, they stop seeing me. I become Catherine Wright's mother instead of Eleanor. Mike nodded slowly, understanding. She thinks very highly of you. She mentioned you've seemed happier lately. A faint blush colored Eleanor's cheeks. Did she? How presumptuous of her. Is she wrong? Eleanor considered this, tracing the rim of her cup with one finger. No, she admitted finally. These past months have been transformative. Not just the swimming. The charged silence that followed held a weight of unspoken possibility. Mike was acutely aware that their relationship had shifted from teacher-student to something less defined but more meaningful. Eleanor, I've been thinking, she interrupted, that I'd like to try swimming in the deep end after the holidays. If you think I'm ready? Mike recognized the deliberate change of subject, the careful steering back to safer waters. I think you're ready whenever you decide you're ready. Eleanor met his eyes, a small smile playing at her lips. That's what I'm beginning to believe about many things. In January, the pool was quieter than usual. Many regular swimmers, still adhering to New Year's resolutions at flashier fitness centers. Eleanor arrived for her lesson bundled against the bitter cold, unwrapping layers like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon. I've been practicing in the bathtub, she announced without preamble. The face and water breathing. I think I've got it now. Mike smiled at her determination. Show me. She did, performing the rhythmic breathing pattern at the pool's edge with newfound confidence. Then, with only minimal hesitation, she allowed Mike to guide her into chest-deep water in the center of the pool. Today, she declared, I want to swim, not just float. Mike clarified, surprised by her ambition. Float, kick, move through the water. Swim. Her voice was firm despite the tremor in her hands. I've watched enough children do it. I've been thinking about the movements. I'm ready. Mike positioned himself beside her. We'll start with floating on your back, then add a gentle kick. I'll support you the whole time. Eleanor nodded, her expression a complex mixture of determination and fear. She leaned back into the water as she'd practiced dozens of times now, allowing her body to rise to the surface, arms outstretched. Now a small flutter kick, Mike instructed, just from the hips like we practiced on the steps. Her legs moved stiffly at first, then with increasing fluidity. Mike kept one hand lightly under her shoulder blades, the other under her lower back, but she was supporting most of her own weight now. I'm going to start moving you backward, he told her. Just keep breathing normally. Slowly, he began walking backward, guiding her floating form through the water. Her kick maintained a steady rhythm, her face tense but determined. I'm going to remove my hand from your lower back, Mike said after they'd traveled several yards. You're doing all the work there already. Eleanor's breath hitched, but she nodded almost imperceptibly. Mike carefully withdrew his hand, leaving only the lightest touch between her shoulder blades. You're swimming, Eleanor, he said softly. You're actually swimming. A small sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. Her eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, but tears spilled from their corners, tracking into her hair. I never thought... She couldn't finish, emotion closing her throat. Let's try to roll you over to a front float, Mike suggested. I'll help you. With his guidance, Eleanor carefully rotated in the water until she was face down. Her head turned to the side for breath as they'd practiced. Her body stiffened momentarily, old fear resurging. I'm right here, Mike reassured her. You're safe. She nodded, forced herself to relax. He showed her how to add arm movements to her kick, simplified beginner strokes. By the end of the hour, she had managed to swim unassisted for brief stretches, her technique unpolished but effective. When they finally exited the pool, Eleanor sat on the bench, wrapped in a towel, a dazed expression on her face. "I swam," she said wonderingly. "After all these years, I actually swam." Mike sat beside her, his own towel draped around his shoulders. "You were amazing. I couldn't have done it without you." Her eyes, when they met his, held a depth of gratitude that made his chest tighten. "You've given me back something I thought was lost forever." "You did the hard part," he insisted. "I just showed you the way." Eleanor shook her head. "It was more than that. You saw me. Not as a foolish old woman, not as Catherine's mother, just as Eleanor, with a fear to overcome." The moment stretched between them, weighted with unspoken feelings. Mike was acutely aware of Eleanor's presence beside him. Not as his student, not as a woman approaching 70, but simply as a person who had become deeply important to him. "I should change," Eleanor said, finally breaking the spell. "It's getting late." Mike nodded, rising. "Of course." But as she stood to go, Eleanor did something unexpected. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek, her lips cool against his skin. "Thank you, Mike Sullivan," she whispered. "For everything." Before he could respond, she disappeared into the changing room, leaving him standing by the pool, his hand unconsciously rising to touch the spot where her lips had been. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor's progress accelerated. By early February, she could swim the width of the pool unassisted, her confidence growing with each session. Their relationship evolved too, the boundaries between teacher and student, between friends and something more, becoming increasingly blurred. They began meeting outside the pool regularly, for coffee, for walks in the park, once for a poetry reading at the local bookstore. Mike found himself sharing more of his writing with her, encouraged by her thoughtful feedback and genuine interest. "You should send the first chapters to Catherine," Eleanor suggested one evening as they sat in her living room, a fire crackling in the hearth, manuscripts spread between them. "She has an eye for potential." Mike shook his head. "It's not ready. Besides, she was just being polite." "My daughter is never just polite about creative work," Eleanor said firmly. "She doesn't need to be. If she offered to read your writing, she meant it." Before Mike could argue further, his phone buzzed. A text from the community center manager. A pipe had burst in the natatorium, flooding the pool area. All classes and sessions were canceled until repairs could be completed, likely a week or more. "No swimming lesson tomorrow," he told Eleanor, showing her the message. Disappointment flickered across her face. "I was looking forward to trying the dive." Mike hesitated, then offered, "My friend has a vacation house on Cedar Lake. Small private dock. If you wanted to try open water." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Open water? I don't know if I'm ready for that." "The dock has steps leading into the water, just like the pool. We could start there, see how you feel." He smiled encouragingly. "You don't have to decide now." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, conflict evident in her expression. Finally, she straightened her shoulders, the same gesture she'd made before every new swimming challenge. "Let's try," she said, "if the weather's good." The February day dawned unusually mild, winter temporarily loosening its grip. The lake was still, reflecting the pale blue sky like a perfect mirror. Mike waited nervously on the small wooden dock, wondering if Eleanor would actually show. Her car appeared precisely at the agreed time. She emerged wearing a long coat over what he presumed was her swimsuit, her expression a mixture of determination and apprehension. "It's beautiful," she said, approaching slowly. Peaceful. "The water's cold," Mike warned. "About 15 degrees Celsius. We don't have to do this today." Eleanor shook her head. "I want to try, just for a minute." She removed her coat, revealing a new swimsuit, still modest, but more elegant than her practical black one, deep blue with a subtle pattern. Mike tried not to notice how it complemented her figure, which was remarkably fit for a woman nearing 70. "The steps are here," he said, guiding her to the side of the dock where 3 wooden steps descended into the clear water. He'd already changed into his swimming trunks and a thermal top. "I'll go first." Mike descended the steps, gasping slightly as the cold water reached his thighs. "Definitely brisk," he called up to her. "Take your time." Eleanor approached the steps cautiously, her body language shifting as memories of the Mediterranean threatened to resurface. She closed her eyes briefly, took a deep breath, and placed one foot on the first step. "That's it," Mike encouraged. "Just like the pool steps." Inch by inch, Eleanor made her way down until she stood beside him, the water at mid-thigh, her breath coming in short, visible puffs in the cool air. "It feels different," she said, her voice tight. "Less controlled." "That's natural," Mike assured her. "Open water always feels different. But the principles are the same. Your body will float here, just like in the pool." Eleanor nodded, though her knuckles were white where she gripped the wooden railing. "What should I do first?" "Let's try floating, right here by the steps where you can easily stand." With visible effort, Eleanor released the railing and turned to face Mike. He positioned himself to support her as she leaned back, just as they'd practiced dozens of times in the pool. But as her head approached the water, panic flashed across her face. "I can't," she gasped, straightening abruptly. "The memory, it's too strong here." Mike steadied her. "It's okay. We can go back to the dock." "No?" Eleanor said, frustration evident in her voice. "I want to do this. I need to do this." She closed her eyes, her face a battlefield of emotion. When she opened them again, there was a new resolve in their depths. "Tell me about your daughter," Mike said suddenly, changing tactics. "What was she like as a child?" Eleanor blinked, surprised by the shift. "Katie? She was fearless, always climbing the highest tree, jumping from the highest diving board. Unlike her mother," Mike said gently. "Unlike her mother," Eleanor agreed with a small smile. "Though perhaps more like her than I realized. We both have our own forms of courage." As she spoke, her body relaxed slightly. Mike guided the conversation, keeping her mind engaged while her body gradually acclimated to the lake water. Finally, he said, "Try floating now." This time, when Eleanor leaned back, she managed to let her head rest in the water. Mike supported her securely, feeling the tension in her body slowly ease as she realized she could float here just as well as in the pool. "I'm doing it," she whispered, wonder replacing fear in her voice. "You are," Mike confirmed. "Do you want to try a little swimming? Just here by the steps?" Eleanor nodded. With Mike's guidance, she rolled onto her stomach and performed the basic stroke they'd been practicing, moving several feet away from the steps before returning. Her smile when she stood again was radiant, transforming her face. "I swam in a lake," she said, her voice filled with quiet triumph. "I actually swam in open water." The accomplishment seemed to unlock something in her. For the next 20 minutes, Eleanor moved between floating and swimming, each attempt growing more confident. Finally, shivering but exhilarated, they climbed back onto the dock. Mike wrapped a large towel around Eleanor's shoulders, his hands lingering briefly. "You were incredible." "I felt incredible," she admitted, her eyes bright with accomplishment. "Like I was finally free of something that's been holding me back my entire life." They stood close together on the dock, the shared experience creating an intimacy that transcended their usual boundaries. Mike was acutely aware of Eleanor's presence, her quickened breath, the droplets of lake water glistening in her silver-streaked hair, the flush of triumph on her cheeks. "Eleanor," he began, uncertain what he wanted to say, but knowing he needed to say something. She looked up at him, something vulnerable and questioning in her gaze. "Yes." Before he could continue, his phone rang shrilly from where he'd left it on the bench. The moment fractured. Eleanor stepped back, drawing the towel more tightly around herself. "You should get that," she said. "It might be important." It was Abby calling about her upcoming spring break visit. By the time Mike finished the conversation, Eleanor had changed back into her street clothes, the moment lost. The community center pool reopened the following week. Their lessons resumed, but something had shifted between them. A new awareness, a careful distance that hadn't been there before. They were polite, friendly, but the easy intimacy they'd developed seemed suddenly complicated. "I think I'm ready to join the regular adult swim class," Eleanor announced after a particularly successful session in late February. "You've done more than enough one-on-one teaching." Mike tried to hide his disappointment. "Are you sure? We still have more to cover with diving, and..." "I'm sure," she interrupted gently. "You've given me the foundation I needed. It's time I stopped taking advantage of your generosity." "It's never felt like that," Mike said quietly. Eleanor's expression softened. "Nevertheless, I think it's time for a change." She hesitated, then added, "Catherine has invited me to Los Angeles for several weeks. She's between projects and wants me to meet some of her friends, see where she works." "That sounds wonderful," Mike said, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. "When do you leave?" "Next week." Eleanor wouldn't quite meet his eyes. "I'll be gone until April." The news hit Mike harder than he'd expected. The thought of weeks without their lessons, without their conversations, left a hollow feeling in his chest. "I'm happy for you," he said, meaning it despite his disappointment. "You deserve that time with your daughter." Eleanor nodded, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Thank you for everything, Mike. Truly." The formality in her voice felt like a door closing. Mike watched her walk away, wondering if he'd misread everything that had passed between them. Till her march dragged by. Mike threw himself into his work, taking on extra classes, spending evenings revising his manuscript. He couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor, her determination, her quiet strength, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. Catherine Wright emailed twice, first to thank him again for helping her mother, then to inquire about his novel. Reluctantly, Mike sent her the first 3 chapters. Her response was enthusiastic and specific, her feedback professional but encouraging. She put him in touch with a literary agent she knew, who expressed interest in seeing the completed manuscript. The unexpected validation spurred Mike to write with renewed purpose. He found himself drawing on his experiences with Eleanor, infusing his protagonist with her courage in the face of deep-seated fear, her willingness to begin again even in the later chapters of life. In early April, as the first daffodils pushed through the still cold ground, Mike received a text from Eleanor. Back in town. Coffee tomorrow. They met at their usual cafe. Eleanor looked different, more relaxed, subtly stylish in a way that suggested Catherine's influence. Her hair was shorter, the silver more prominent against the dark. "You look well," Mike said, meaning it. "California agreed with you." "It was illuminating," Eleanor replied. "Katie's world is so different from mine. All that energy, constant motion." She smiled. "I enjoyed it, but I'm glad to be home." "Did you swim?" Mike asked. "In the Pacific?" A flush of pride colored Eleanor's cheeks. "I did. Not far, just waiting and floating near the shore. But I did it. Without panic." "That's wonderful." They fell into easier conversation then, Eleanor sharing stories of her time in Los Angeles, Mike updating her on changes at the community center. Neither mentioned the moment on the dock or the careful distance that had preceded her departure. As they were finishing their coffee, Eleanor said suddenly, "Catherine mentioned she's been in touch with you about your writing." Mike nodded. "She's been incredibly helpful. She connected me with an agent who's interested in the book." "I'm glad," Eleanor said softly. "You deserve that recognition." She hesitated, then added, "Katie thinks very highly of your work. She said it has authentic emotional resonance, which from her is extraordinary praise." "I've been inspired lately," Mike said, holding Eleanor's gaze, "by someone who showed me what real courage looks like." Eleanor looked down, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "Will you walk with me? There's something I'd like to show you." They strolled through the small town center, the April air crisp but hinting at spring. Eleanor led him to the community center, which was closed on Sundays. "I have a key," she explained, producing it from her purse. "Catherine made a donation while I was in California for renovations to the pool area. The director gave me this so I could see the progress whenever I wanted." Inside, the natatorium was transformed. New tiles gleamed around the pool edge. Improved lighting brightened the space, and sleek new starting blocks adorned the deep end. "It's amazing," Mike said, genuinely impressed. "The kids will love it." "There's more," Eleanor said, leading him to a newly installed plaque near the entrance. It read, "The Eleanor Wright Learn to Swim Program. It's never too late to overcome your fears. Established 2023. Mike stared at the plaque, then at Eleanor. "You did this?" She shook her head. "Catherine did, though I approved the wording. The donation includes funding for scholarships for swimming lessons, for children and adults who couldn't otherwise afford them." "Eleanor, that's incredible. I wanted something good to come from my experience," she said simply. "Something that might help others find what I found here." Mike was deeply moved by the gesture. "You so might. What you found here. What was that exactly?" Eleanor met his gaze directly. "Courage. Freedom from a lifelong fear." She paused, then added more softly, "And an unexpected connection that became very important to me." The words hung between them, an opening where before there had been careful distance. "I've missed you," Mike said finally, the admission simpler than he'd expected. "I've missed you too," Eleanor replied. "More than I anticipated." Mike took a step closer. "When you left so suddenly, I thought perhaps I'd misunderstood what was happening between us." "You didn't misunderstand," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just needed time to be sure." "Sure of what?" "That what I was feeling wasn't just gratitude. That the connection between us was real, not just a product of vulnerability and support." She smiled slightly. "I'm nearly 70, Mike. You're in your 40s. It seemed unexpected," Mike supplied. "Yes, unexpected." Eleanor's eyes held his. "But during these weeks away, I realized that the unexpected has given me some of the greatest joys of my life." My daughter, my career. Learning to swim after 60 years of fear. She took a deep breath. And you, Mike closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. I don't care about our ages, Eleanor. I care about who we are together, how we see each other. The way you've changed how I think about courage, about starting over, about what matters. Eleanor's hands tightened around his. I don't know what this is or where it might lead, but I'd like to find out. If you would. Instead of answering with words, Mike leaned down and kissed her gently. Eleanor responded with a tenderness that made his heart swell, her hands moving to rest lightly on his shoulders. When they parted, Eleanor's eyes were bright with emotion. Well, she said softly, that seems clear enough. Mike smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. Crystal clear. Like the water when you're finally not afraid to open your eyes beneath the surface. Eleanor laughed, a free, unguarded sound that echoed in the empty natatorium. Is that from your novel? It might be now, Mike admitted, drawing her close again. Around them, the pool water lapped gently against the tiles, a constant, soothing rhythm like a heartbeat. Through the high windows, spring sunlight danced across the surface, casting ripples of light that surrounded them in a shifting, shimmering glow. For Eleanor, who had spent a lifetime afraid of water's depths, and for Mike, who had been treading in place, waiting for a current to carry him forward, it felt like the beginning of something neither had expected, but both had somehow been waiting for. A chance to dive deep together and discover what treasures might be found below the surface of an ordinary life, transformed by extraordinary courage.